Hello, and welcome to HBM's Crypto-Corner for Wednesday, March 16th, 2022. We have a couple of things to talk about, so let's get started. No Loch Ness Monster sightings in 2022. Is this the end of Nessie? At the time of this writing, there have been no sightings of the Loch Ness Monster. None by on-site witnesses and none by those who watched the 24/7 webcam. That's nearly 2.5 months with no Nessie. Is this a bad sign? Has the monster slash dinosaur slash giant eel slash whales catfish died? Did it not wear a mask? There have been a few reports sent to us on the webcam, but we've been able to explain them. The Daily Record went to the man who knows all about Loch Ness Monster sightings, Gary Campbell, the manager of the official Loch Ness Monster Register. Despite criticisms to the contrary, Campbell looks at all reports, photos, and videos to determine if there is another explanation for the anomaly seen by witnesses. If not, he adds it to the register, which shows 16 sightings in 2021, 6 in person and 10 via webcam. That's down slightly from the record-breaking total of 18 in 2019, when watching the webcam became popular. At the other end, there was only one sighting in 2013 and 2010. Going back to 1986, 1997 had 17 sightings, but most years were in the single digits and none had none. Could 2022 be the first year with no sightings? We never know from year to year how it will go, but if tourist numbers increase as COVID abates, then hopefully there will be more from people who are physically at the loch. Campbell seems confident that there will be sightings once the weather and COVID break and more tourists visit the loch again. However, that ignores all the people at home watching the 24/7 Nessie cam. Should the number of sightings in that mode be up? The cam has been so popular, there is talk of putting more up in other strategic locations around Loch Ness where sightings have occurred before. Campbell isn't a fan of this idea. There has been a lot of discussion about this, but someone would have to pay for it. There are also still broadband connectivity issues at the loch which may hinder such efforts. In reality, he seems to not be a fan of the cam in general. He began separating cam sightings in the register in 2021, saying it was only fair to show the reports of webcam images in a separate list from those reported by the people at the loch. This, we feel, gives a proper feel for the global reach of the Loch Ness phenomenon. It also puts more credence on videos and photos taken by cell phones from the shore or loch tour boats. This has meant that there is more and more picture/video evidence being captured, which both helps with the search and also, conversely, helps give explanations for most of what people are seeing. Campbell is a believer. He thinks it's an aquatic creature that doesn't need to come to the surface to breathe, and it would have to be able to live in fresh water. After 26 years of managing the register, that's the best he can do. That also goes for Steve Felham, the world's most dedicated Loch Ness monster hunter who has spent 24 years in a trailer on the Loch Ness shore without seeing the creature he fears one day will be identified as a large whale's catfish. Is Nessie dead? Hiding? Moved on to a less busy loch? Keep your eye on the webcam. So, apparently no sightings for 2022 so far, but that doesn't mean there won't be any. And I don't think Nessie is dead. I think it's just... I think the creature is in hiding. And if they've had supposed sightings which have been easily explained, then it would seem to me that Loch Ness Monster, I guess, is just in hiding right now. So who knows? Finally, Gatton claimed an 1899 Bigfoot sighting in Richland County. This story was originally published on Richland Source in 2015. When I was a kid, I worked at the scout camp and made friends with an old scoutmaster who was once acquainted with Cy Gatton. As a young man, my friend had camped with his own troop at Gatton Rocks back in the 1930s. He knew all of Cy's famous stories, loved all his outrageous lies, and was able to approximate Cy's unique, droll performance in a thoroughly entertaining way. One night it happened that all the scouts were off somewhere, and he and I were sitting together by the fireside, talking quietly about events in our lives that we would never forget. He told me that once long ago he had the identical experience with Cy Gatton. The two of them had a quiet hour when they exchanged meaningful experiences in the light of a campfire. It was something he would never forget because he felt privileged to have a man so famous as Cy Gatton take him into his confidence and trust him with his secrets. That night he heard a story that Cy would never dare to tell in front of a crowd. Though Cy was famous for being a rather fabulous liar, he was taking a quiet, offhand moment of truth to tell of something that happened to him that no one would ever believe. Cy's credentials. This was in 1933, and the encounter that Cy spoke about happened to him when he was a man about 35, which placed the incident around 1899. Cy was a well-known naturalist. He was recognized by early conservationists and by lifelong professional botanists, horticulturalists, and scientists as a man who knew the outdoors very well. He had seen and could identify nearly every plant, bird, tree, or moth. He had been fishing his entire life and knew every fish and salamander and insect there was to find in Richland County. He had been hunting in the woods and fields of Jefferson Township since he was a boy, and knew every track in the woods, every paw print and spore and nest and animal den there was to be found. As a woodsman, as a tracker, he was without peer in the woods surrounding the forks of the Mohican. He had seen it all, done it all. That's why he was so totally dumbfounded and freaked out. He lowered his voice when he told the story and said he only repeated it to a handful of men in his lifetime. The telling. It was late summer and the sun was slipping away the day it happened. Cy was way out back of the farm picking himself a bucket full of huckleberries in a small sunny glade tucked in the middle of the forest, a glade that only he knew about. He was alone at the time because he didn't want anyone else to know about his secret berry patch, so he always sneaked out there when no one was looking. It was odd, he said, because somehow he had gotten turned around that day on the forest trails he knew so well. He thought he was lost for a few minutes until he stumbled into his glen in the woods somehow from a different direction than he thought would even be possible. He said he should have known right then that it was a day he'd never forget. The berries were ripe that evening and the bushes were full, and Cy bent over and went right to work filling up his bucket. He was so focused on the work he lost track of the evening sun, so it became a race to get the huckleberries picked while there was still enough light to see. When it came right to the exact moment of twilight, he knew his harvest was complete. He stood up tall to orient himself among the shrub brush to find his way for the walk home. As he turned to scan the tree line, he caught sight of a man standing about a dozen yards away among the berry bushes. The man was turning around the same as Cy, scanning the trees, and they both locked eyes at the same moment. You know how it is. 1,000 thoughts run through your mind when you're startled. And Cy's overriding emotion at first was a sort of righteous indignation, a sense of betrayal because he assumed it was someone from the farm who had followed him out to discover the secret berry patch. He was about to speak when suddenly it dawned on him that these eyes he was staring at, while he looked so human, were not those of a man. This big guy he was looking at was covered with hair, not like a hermit or a hobo, but furry hair that covered his entire body. You know how it is that in a moment of crisis, several possible escape routes rush through your head at the same time. Cy was quickly calculating whether he should bolt toward the river or climb a tree. He figured somehow he had run into a bear, even though there hadn't been a bear sighted in Richland County for over 50 years. About the moment he had decided, he would slowly and purposefully stalk off the field. As he knew was proper when dealing with a bear, that's exactly what the big hairy creature did. The creature was easily 9 feet tall. His eyes were oddly like a man's, and when he turned to walk away, it wasn't on all fours like a bear, but strolling with arms swinging just like a human. with only a casual glance back at Cy over his shoulder. The long silence. So Cy Gatton, the man who made himself famous by telling monstrous fibs, couldn't tell anyone the truth about that day because he knew no one would believe him. He honestly didn't know what to think. He wondered if he had slipped a cog somehow in the crankshaft of his mind. He had utterly no context in which to file this report. And as time went by, he wondered if somehow in the twilight he had tripped off the bonds of sanity into a dream. That's what it felt like, a weird dream that wakes you up in the night and has you shaking your head in the dark. It was about 25 years later when he was in Philadelphia, where he was invited to attend a national convention of the famous Tall Stories Club, that he began to find a fabric of mythology that he could wrap his experience around to make it almost fit into reality. The event was a convocation of American storytellers, and he had occasion to sit in on a session with an old Oneida medicine man who was telling ancient tales from his tribal lore. The old shaman told the legend of an Iroquois warrior who had thoughtlessly killed a sacred bear and was thereafter condemned by the guardians to spend half of his life clothed in the body of a bear. He was sort of a shapeshifter, half man, half bear. While everyone in the room assumed the old shaman was spinning a myth, only Cy Gatton was feeling like he suddenly, at long last, had a clue to the puzzle he had been silently pondering for years. Line of provenance. Cy told this to my friend in confidence in 1933, and it was 40 years later when the tale was relayed to me. Those 40 years of evolving U.S. popular culture made a difference in uncoding the relevance of Cy's adventure, however, because both the Scoutmaster and myself had, in intervening years, lived through the early 1960s. That's when a new concept had evolved in the American language by the addition of two names not heard in 1933, Bigfoot and Sasquatch. Since I heard Cy's tale in the 1970s, a whole subculture of paranormal investigation has developed on the American continent. Not only is the idea of Bigfoot common, it is now quantified and charted and documented. I happened onto a website recently set up by an organization called the Bigfoot Field Research Organization and discovered that, amazingly enough, Ohio is an actual hotbed of Bigfoot sightings and that, astonishingly, the database includes 4 sightings in Richland County. I wish old Cy Gatton could see the charts and maps today, hear the descriptions, and see the research done by naturalists like himself. Maybe he'd sleep a little better knowing he wasn't the only crazy one. So, is this just a tall tale? That's my question. Is this just a tall tale, another tall tale from Cy Gatton? Or did he actually see a Sasquatch in 1899? Now, that's an excellent question. I think it's a question we have to ask ourselves. I think it's a legitimate question. Obviously, Sasquatch was not widely known in 1899. It wasn't even known as Sasquatch. More than likely, it would have been known as a wild man or a gorilla or something like that. But I don't know. This one's hard to judge because there were Sasquatch reports in 1899. But could this have possibly? I don't know. It's hard. Like I say, it's hard to determine, hard to gauge. It really is. And that's going to do it for this week. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. You guys are the heart of the show. I always say that, but I always mean it. And I will continue to do this as long as you guys want me to. I will not be doing a show next week. I'm going to be taking a week off, but I will be back the week after. Unless there's late breaking news. Now, if there's some late breaking news, yes, I will come on and I will talk about it. But other than that, no show next week. So until 2 weeks from now, y'all be good or be good at it. This is May-HBM, Crypto-Corner.